I've been lurking on Reddit for years, especially on family and relationship subs, and I never thought I'd actually post. But lately, I keep replaying my childhood in my head, and I need to get this out somewhere people might actually understand. I grew up in a pretty typical-looking family from the outside. Two parents, two kids. My older brother was born first, and from the very beginning, he was the plan. The golden child. The future. The one my parents were absolutely sure would make it big. I was born a few years later, and according to family stories, my arrival was inconvenient. No one ever said outright, "We didn't want you." But you don't need words when actions make it clear. My parents talked about my brother's potential constantly, how smart he was, how special, how everything they sacrificed was for his future. When people asked about me, I was usually introduced as the younger one or his sister. Never as my own person. Growing up, I felt like a backup plan. Like I existed just in case something went wrong with their real investment, my brother. If he succeeded, great. If not, well, maybe I'd be useful somehow. The weirdest part? My parents genuinely believed they were being fair. They'd say things like, "Your brother just needs more support," or "You're strong, you'll manage." Translation: he deserved everything, and I was expected to adapt. The only person who ever treated me like I mattered from day one was my grandmother. She used to tell me, quietly, when my parents weren't around, that I wasn't invisible, they just chose not to see me. At the time, I didn't fully understand what she meant. I do now. If you've ever grown up being constantly compared to a sibling, you already know how this goes. It didn't happen all at once. It was subtle, casual, normal. When I brought home a 90% on a test, my mom would say, "Your brother got 95% at your age." When I made the school volleyball team, my dad said, "That's nice, but your brother was always more academically gifted." If I was quiet, I was moody. If he was quiet, he was deep. If I cried, I was too sensitive. If he failed, he was under pressure. The comparisons were constant, like background noise I couldn't turn off. And the worst part? They weren't just comparing achievements, they were comparing value. My parents talked about his future like it was already written in gold. He's going to do something big. He's destined for success. He just has that spark. With me, it was always, "She's practical. She'll manage. She's not as ambitious, but that's fine." Not ambitious. I was 10. I started shrinking myself without even realizing it. I stopped celebrating my wins because they never felt big enough. I downplayed my grades. I stopped asking for help. I learned that attention only came when I caused a problem, and I didn't want to be a problem. By the time I was a teenager, my self-esteem was hanging by a thread. I genuinely believed my brother was the main character in our family story, and I was just a supporting role. Replaceable. Optional. The only person who saw what it was doing to me was my grandmother. She'd pull me aside after family dinners and say, "They're wrong about you. Don't let their blindness become your truth." At the time, I nodded. But inside, I already believed my parents. And that belief followed me for years. By the time I was in my final year of high school, my brother had already been labeled the future success story. My parents had spent years investing in his tutors, extracurriculars, networking opportunities, all of it. When it came to me, the expectations were modest. My dad once said, very casually, "You don't need to aim that high. Something stable is fine." Stable. Safe. Small. But here's the thing, I had good grades. Actually, I had great grades. I just never made a big deal out of them because no one else did. When I told my parents I wanted to apply to a prestigious university, they looked at each other like I had just announced I was moving to Mars. "That's very competitive," my mom said carefully. "Be realistic," my dad added. They didn't forbid me. They just didn't support me. No encouragement. No help with applications. No, "We believe in you." The only person who sat down with me at the kitchen table and helped me fill out scholarship forms was my grandmother. She told me, "Apply everywhere. Let them reject you, don't reject yourself first." So I applied. And I got in. I still remember holding the acceptance letter in my hands, shaking. For one second, I thought, Maybe now they'll see me. But the reaction at home wasn't pride. It was silence. My brother had applied to a different program that year and didn't get into his top choice. Suddenly, the house atmosphere was heavy, tense. All the attention shifted to comforting him. When I asked about tuition, my parents said they couldn't afford to pay for both of us and my brother needed more financial support right now. That's when my grandmother quietly stepped in. She paid for my tuition. All of it. She told my parents, right in front of me, if you won't invest in her future, I will. I've never felt more seen in my life. And that's the moment I realized something important. If I was going to build a life worth something, I would have to do it without them. Moving away for university felt like stepping into oxygen after years of barely breathing. For the first time in my life, I wasn't his sister. I wasn't the practical one. I was just me. And something unexpected happened. People believed in me. My professors encouraged my ideas. When I stayed after class to ask questions, they didn't look annoyed, they looked impressed. One of them even told me, "You think critically. Don't underestimate that." I went back to my dorm room and cried because no adult had ever said something like that to me before. My classmates didn't compare me to anyone. They celebrated good grades. They studied with me. They treated me like I belonged there. Belonged. That word felt foreign. Meanwhile, back home, my brother was struggling. He changed majors twice. Dropped classes. Blamed professors. Blamed the system. My parents blamed bad luck. Whenever I visited during holidays, the dynamic hadn't changed. They'd ask about my brother's plans for hours. When it came to me, it was quick. "How are your classes?" "Fine." "That's good." End of conversation. It stopped hurting as much because I had started building something outside of them. I worked part-time, built connections, did internships. And I was good at it. Not because I was special, but because I had learned to survive on my own. I was disciplined. Self-sufficient. Used to figuring things out without help. The irony? The very neglect that crushed my self-esteem as a kid became the reason I learned independence. By my final year, I had a job offer waiting for me after graduation. When I told my parents, my dad said, "Well, that's a start." A start. I didn't argue anymore. I didn't try to impress them. I just nodded. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't building my future for their approval. I was building it for me. After graduation, I moved to a new city for work. It wasn't glamorous at first, small apartment, second-hand furniture, too much instant ramen, but it was mine. My job turned out to be better than I expected. The team was supportive. My manager actually gave feedback that wasn't criticism disguised as advice. When I did well on a project, he said it directly. "Great work. You handled that perfectly." The first time I heard that in a professional setting, I had to mute myself on a call because I felt my throat tighten. I worked hard. Not in a desperate, prove my worth way anymore, but in a focused, steady way. I showed up prepared. I asked smart questions. I volunteered for projects no one else wanted. And slowly, things started happening. A raise. A promotion. More responsibility. For the first time in my life, my effort and results were directly connected. No comparisons. No shadow hanging over me. Meanwhile, back home, the story with my brother was different. He dropped out of his program entirely. Then tried a business idea that failed within months. Then another. Each time, my parents funded him. Each time, it was someone else's fault when it didn't work out. "He just hasn't found his real calling yet," my mom would say. When I called home, they barely asked about my job. But they'd spend 40 minutes explaining how hard things were for him. And here's the part that started shifting something in me. I stopped feeling jealous. I started feeling distant. Because for the first time, I could see clearly. They weren't blind to my success. They just didn't value it the same way. But that was okay. Because I finally did. I didn't tell my parents I was saving for a house. Not because I wanted to hide it, but because I didn't want their voices in my head telling me it was too ambitious or unnecessary. For 3 years, I worked, saved, invested carefully, and kept my lifestyle simple. No flashy vacations. No designer anything. Just quiet discipline. And then one afternoon, Sitting across from a realtor, I signed the papers. It wasn't a mansion. It wasn't some luxury showpiece. But it was mine. A small, beautiful house with big windows and a backyard I could barely believe belonged to me. I remember standing alone in the empty living room after getting the keys, the sound echoing off the walls, and thinking, they were wrong about me. I didn't post it on social media right away. I told my grandmother first. She cried. She said, I always knew you would build something solid. You were never the spare. When I finally told my parents, the reaction was complicated. My dad said, that's a big financial responsibility. My mom asked, are you sure you didn't rush into it? No, we're proud of you. No, congratulations. Meanwhile, my brother was back living with them. Another failed venture. More debt. More temporary setbacks. He didn't say much when he heard about the house. Just nodded and said, must be nice. But there was something in his eyes I hadn't seen before. Not indifference. Resentment. And that's when things started to shift from quiet tension to something much uglier. I wish I could say what happened next surprised me. It didn't. A few weeks after I bought the house, things at work started feeling off. Conversations would stop when I entered a room. A coworker who used to be friendly suddenly became distant. My manager scheduled an unexpected performance discussion, and the tone was colder than usual. Then it came out. Someone had anonymously reported that I had falsified parts of my resume, that I had exaggerated responsibilities in past roles, that my recent promotion was based on misrepresentation. I felt physically sick reading the email. Everything I had built, years of discipline, effort, independence, suddenly hanging by a thread because of a lie. HR opened a review. My access to certain systems was temporarily limited. The promotion was under evaluation. I couldn't breathe. And then I found out where it started. A former family friend reached out to me privately and asked if everything was okay because my brother had been telling people that I cut corners and wasn't as qualified as people thought. He framed it like concern, like he was just being honest. He had been spreading it casually, quietly, planting seeds. Apparently, he couldn't just sit there while I acted superior. I confronted him. At first, he denied it. Then he said, I didn't think it would go that far. Then he accused me of abandoning the family and forgetting where I came from. The betrayal hurt more than the fear. Because deep down, I think I always knew he resented me. I just didn't think he would try to destroy me. For weeks, I lived in survival mode. I gathered every document, every reference, every email thread, every project record. I worked twice as hard while under investigation, terrified that one misstep would confirm a narrative I didn't create. And the worst part? My parents knew. And they didn't tell him to stop. My mom said, he's just frustrated. Try to understand. Understand? He was trying to ruin my career and possibly my ability to pay for the house I had just bought. For the first time in my life, I felt something stronger than sadness. I felt anger. I didn't sleep properly for almost a month. Every email notification made my heart race. Every meeting invite felt like a possible termination call. I kept imagining the worst-case scenario, losing my job, losing my house, proving my parents right that I wasn't built for big things. But this time, I didn't shrink. I documented everything. I compiled proof of every project I'd led, screenshots of performance reviews, written praise from clients, metrics, reports, dates, timelines, receipts for everything I had ever accomplished professionally. When HR asked for clarification, I didn't defend myself emotionally. I presented facts. Calm, organized, unshakable. My manager, who had initially seemed distant, later admitted he was under pressure to take the allegations seriously. But once the internal review began, the truth became obvious very quickly. There were no inconsistencies, no falsified records, no exaggerated claims. In fact, they found that my performance had been consistently above average since day one. The case was closed, officially cleared, promotion reinstated, access fully restored. HR even issued a formal note confirming that the claims were unsubstantiated. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt changed. because something clicked inside me during that month. For years, I had been trying to prove my worth quietly, respectfully, hoping that if I just did enough, it would finally be acknowledged. But fighting for my name like that did something different. It made me realize I don't owe anyone smallness, especially not people who tried to bury me. When I told my parents the investigation was over and I was cleared, my mom said, "See, it all worked out." Worked out. As if it was random luck, not weeks of stress and strength. My brother never apologized. He just stopped mentioning it. But I knew this wasn't over. Because when someone builds their identity on being the chosen one, watching the spare succeed feels like a threat. And threats make people desperate. A few weeks after everything settled at work, my parents asked if we could have a serious talk. That phrase alone used to make my stomach drop. We did a video call. My brother was sitting next to them on the couch. That should have been my first sign. My dad cleared his throat and said, "We've been thinking about the future." Whenever my parents said the future, they meant my brother's future. They started explaining how hard things had been financially, how supporting him through his rough phase had drained their savings, how expensive everything was now, how family is supposed to help each other. Then it came. "You're doing well," my mom said gently. "You have the house, a stable job. We're proud of you." That word, proud, felt rehearsed. My dad continued, "Your brother just needs a bit of support to get back on his feet. Maybe you could help him financially, just until he stabilizes." I actually laughed at first. I thought it was a joke. It wasn't. They were serious. After years of investing everything in him, after paying for his failed ventures, after standing by while he tried to sabotage my career, they wanted me to fund him. I asked calmly, "Did he apologize for what he did?" Silence. My mom shifted in her seat. "That's in the past." In the past. Like the stress, the sleepless nights, the fear of losing everything. Just a minor inconvenience. My brother finally spoke. "You make more than enough. It's not like you'll even feel it." That sentence did something to me. It wasn't about money. It was about entitlement. They still saw him as the investment, and me as the backup resource. And that's when I realized something painful but freeing. They never stopped believing he was the main character. They just expected me to bankroll the sequel. I had imagined this moment before. In my head, I'd be calm, collected, emotionally detached. In reality, my hands were shaking under the desk. I took a breath and said, very clearly, "No." You would have thought I'd just announced I was disowning them. My mom's face immediately fell. My dad's jaw tightened. My brother scoffed. "It's not that much," he said. "You're being dramatic." I kept my voice steady. "I'm not giving him money." My dad leaned forward. Family supports family. And for the first time in my life, I didn't back down. "Did family support me?" I asked. Silence. I reminded them who paid for my education, who encouraged me, who helped me fill out applications, who believed in me when they didn't. It wasn't them. When I mentioned the rumors my brother spread, my mom tried to brush it off again. "He was in a bad place. And I was almost unemployed," I replied. That's when the narrative shifted. Suddenly I was cold, ungrateful, changed. My dad said something that I don't think I'll ever forget. "After everything we've done for you." I actually felt something inside me snap. Everything? The comparisons? The neglect? The years of emotional invisibility? The silence while their son tried to ruin my career? That everything? I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just said, "You didn't build my life." I did. And I ended the call. For hours after, my phone blew up with messages. Guilt. Pressure. Passive-aggressive comments about loyalty and sacrifice. My brother sent one final text. "Don't come asking for help when things fall apart." The irony. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the spare. I wasn't the safety net. I was just done. Unsurprisingly, saying no didn't end the war at home. Within days, my parents started calling me ungrateful. Not once. Not twice. Repeatedly. Every phone call, every family text chain. "You're forgetting who raised you. After everything we've done for you, you think you can just ignore family?" I had to remind myself, They weren't really talking about me. They were talking about the idea of me, the compliant, quiet daughter who would support the golden child. The backup plan who never needed her own voice. It was exhausting. I won't lie. Some nights, I still questioned myself. Am I really being selfish? Should I just give in? Then my grandmother stepped in. She called me one evening, just before dinner, her voice calm but firm. Do you remember when you were 10 and they told you you'd never be as special as your brother? I nodded, tears prickling. They were wrong then. And they're wrong now. You owe them nothing. Not for being born. Not for surviving their favoritism. Not for being you. I realized she was right. They hadn't given me anything to be grateful for. The love and support I needed came from her, and she made sure I had the tools to succeed on my own. For the first time, I felt fully defended. Fully seen. Fully justified. I responded to my parents politely but firmly. I will not give him money. I've worked for everything I have, and I won't let him take it from me or use me as a crutch. The conversation ended. Not with applause. Not with understanding. But it ended without me feeling guilty. For the first time, I was not their spare child. I was myself. Fully. After my firm refusal, the backlash at home could have crushed me, but my grandmother stepped in like a shield. She didn't argue or yell. She simply laid out the truth for my parents, calmly but firmly. You did not support your daughter. You did not invest in her. She is not obligated to prop up your mistakes. She reminded them, in no uncertain terms, that everything I had achieved was without their help. That the scholarships, the tuition, the encouragement, the independence, it all came from her because she saw my worth when they didn't. I'll never forget what she said next. Your son has always been your favorite. Fine. But you cannot punish your daughter for being competent and successful. That is not gratitude. That is fairness. Hearing that from her, I finally felt something I hadn't felt in years. Validation. I wasn't wrong for standing my ground. I wasn't selfish. I wasn't ungrateful. From that moment, I realized my grandmother wasn't just defending me. She was teaching me how to stop letting my parents' unfairness define me. And slowly, the tension started to shift. My parents grumbled, of course. But they could no longer guilt me. For the first time, I was free to fully live my life on my terms, without their judgment hanging over every decision. It wasn't perfect. My brother was still angry. My parents still believed they had the right to dictate how I used my money. But I had a boundary now one they couldn't cross. And boundaries, I learned, were powerful. After that, life started to feel lighter. I stopped checking in constantly to see if my parents were happy with my choices. I didn't wait for their approval before making major decisions. I started living fully for myself, and it was liberating. I decorated my house exactly how I wanted. I traveled to cities I'd dreamed of visiting. I invested in my career, accepted promotions, and even started mentoring younger colleagues, something I'd always wanted to do but never felt confident enough to pursue before. I still kept in touch with my parents, but on my terms. Calls were shorter. Visits were structured. I no longer gave them my emotional labor or my financial resources to fix their mistakes. The best part? I started to thrive in ways I never could while trying to meet their expectations. I built friendships that were genuine. I gained mentors who believed in me. I had moments of true happiness that weren't colored by their judgment. And yes, my brother still resented me. But I learned to stop letting his bitterness control my life. He could spread rumors, fail businesses, and demand support, but none of it could touch the life I had built from scratch. For the first time, I realized something important. My success didn't need validation. My happiness didn't need permission. And slowly, the idea that I had once been the spare child faded. Because I wasn't spare anymore. I was the author of my own life. Of course, old habits die hard. A few months later, my parents tried again. This time, it was more subtle. My dad called during a work trip. You know, if you helped your brother, it would really ease the family's burden. I could hear the expectation behind every word. The guilt waiting to sink in. I paused, took a deep breath, and said exactly what I'd learned to say. No. I've supported myself my whole life. I will not support someone else's failures. I won't give him money, and I won't let guilt manipulate me. My mom tried a softer approach. We're just asking for family loyalty. I laughed quietly, though not unkindly. Family loyalty doesn't mean sacrificing my life for your favorites. You've seen what I've done for myself. It's not a favor you did for me. And that's why I'm not obligated to fund your mistakes. The conversation ended with silence. Not anger this time, just the awkward quiet of realization that I had set a boundary they couldn't push past. It was liberating. Scary, but liberating. I finally understood that some battles aren't about convincing people, they're about holding your ground and protecting yourself. And that's exactly what I did. After everything, it wasn't my parents' approval that mattered. It was my grandmother's. She came to visit me a few weeks after the last confrontation. She walked through my house, smiled at the rooms I'd decorated exactly how I wanted, and hugged me tight. "You did it," she said, her voice shaking. "You built this life. You didn't wait for anyone. You didn't bend to anyone's expectations. You're not the spare, you're the whole story." For the first time, I didn't feel like I had to prove anything. I wasn't competing with my brother. I wasn't shrinking myself to make my parents comfortable. I wasn't carrying their guilt or their unfairness. I was free. And more than free, I was finally seen. Truly seen. By someone who mattered. My parents? They're still my parents. Complicated. Expectant. Sometimes unfair. But I no longer let that define me. I've learned that love doesn't have to come from everyone. Sometimes it only has to come from the right people, and for me, that was my grandmother. She reminded me all along that my worth wasn't measured by comparisons, expectations, or favoritism. It was measured by who I am and what I create with my own hands. And now, after years of being this spare child, I finally know my value. And no one can take that away.